Hi, Victor. In the world of retail banking, do they use NLP and AI in their efforts to find fraudulent activity?
Absolutely. One of the first big neural networks, deep learning models that I was ever a part of and deployed was actually in a bank about risk tolerance and risk appetite. So there, it was really based on strictly AI, not really looking at NLP and those kind of signals, but it was largely looking at who's going to default on certain loans.
Oh,
I mean, pretty large banks have been doing this that's like 5 years ago. So for half a decade, largely they've been looking to assess risk, especially in the retail world, as much as possible. The commercial banking side and the investment banking side, they have a lot more money and a lot more budget. So they're even further ahead in terms of the AI used and the techniques they use. However, in retail banking, it largely is about risk tolerance. And that's a very nice way to look at fraud. You're looking at how much risk do we have an appetite for, and how risky is this person. There may be opportunities for money laundering because you're talking about loans or disposition of assets. And you have to report all those sort of transactions as well. And just like in the world of insurance, so much of this is at the end of the day applied for. As you're putting your information into these applications, it's very possible and plausible that these banks actually do the sort of NLU understanding of the application to try and look for signals that may point them to fraud. So that's on the applied application of the retail side. Now, the other portions are more of the internal operations of a bank, because you have a lot of actors in a bank. There's, thousands of people in large bank organizations, and it just takes one person to be kind of naughty to cause the whole bank a whole bunch of backlash. So you want to have a system in place that allows you to detect fraud that may also be occurring internally, because that's stuff that will go sort of brushed under the rug for a very long time, if not actually brushed under the rug, but just it's hidden away, just largely because you don't expect that your staff is the one who's committing the fraud, although it happens quite often. One such example was, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, there was like this huge debacle at Wells Fargo. The back office of mortgage and loan applications was pushing through loans to make the numbers for the loan officers, so for the front of house. So the front of house was basically taking a loan or an application, and maybe there was two parties on it and they were splitting it up into two loans or two applications, or they were finding other weird ways to apply for fake loans. Now, all of those applications, because it's done by the people who work at the bank, probably were like super solid, right? And then you're thinking, well, how would we look at fraud here then? The thing that gave it away, had they done the analysis during this occurring rather than after the fact, was that there was IM messaging and email threads. And there's a lot of that going on, and the bank had access to it because, you're an employee of the bank. They can't read your emails. There's nothing, untoward or odd about that, whether you like it or not. So they basically could have been watching for these kind of fraudulent activities at the bank using the communications that are going internally. So what that does for a lot of banks is it makes the executive team super exposed when something happens, because realistically the executive team isn't watching every transaction as it's being done in a world of many thousand transactions per second, not per day. So it's hard for the executive team to really know every loan that's being parsed out and whether it's a legitimate loan. So having a system, especially, an agent or an AI who's looking at these things and trying to understand when something is looking fishy more than anything. It doesn't quite match the kinds of transactions you've had in the past, or maybe the volume is high. There's something that's weird about today's number of transactions, or the kinds of transactions, or what Bob is giving you in terms of their transactions. it gives at least your managers and their directors and their VPs, it gives them an opportunity to go look at these things, right? And in looking at them, you may find that there's actually some malfeasance going on, which you want to look at even further. And that's something that using NLP, obviously, because this is email and communications, would be required to understand all that text as well. And then to really, break it down and understand what could be fraud, what wouldn't be fraud. So, really at that point, you got banks internal and external using AI and NLP for fraud detection.
It's very good. Very useful, I would say.
Absolutely. So today we talked largely about large organizations using AI and NLP in fraud detection. That isn't to say that this isn't useful or prevalent in smaller organizations. Obviously there's small organizations in e-commerce, insurance, banking, all across, but even different industries.